Fernando Mendoza, the prospective quarterback of the Las Vegas former Oakland Raiders, uh, and once Indiana quarterback, and before that, of course, Cal Golden Bear quarterback. And it's this article written by someone by the name of Daniel Kelly in a publication called FirstRoundMock.com. The title is Fernando Mendoza Will Fail with the Team That Selects Him If He Goes in the First Round. And I thought, oh, seriously? So I read this because I wanted to see what this fellow's thinking was, if any. And he writes, uh, I gave quarterback Fernando Mendoza a fifth round grade when I evaluated his 2024 game film. Did he improve in 2025? A little, Daniel writes in italics. How does what he showed on game film in Indiana translate to the NFL? And then he just jumps off with, well, reading coverage will be a problem. He writes, I don't think Mendoza can read defenses that well post snap. In other words, after the ball is, put in his hands. What? And he says, yeah. Then he writes, most of the time it looked like Mendoza's throwing locations were predetermined before the ball was snapped. He is a 1-2 read quarterback who played in a heavy RPO run pass option offense. Most throws were first read, either naked or off the play action motion. Some were two read. I counted 9 times he got to his third read, and 2 times he got to his fourth read in 13 games. I'm going to stop right there because, Daniel, sorry, but you need to know the difference between a read and a look. And this is one of these folks who really never sits to think about what they're writing and say, does what I wrote actually make sense? Okay. I'm going to turn to my friend Steve Mariucci, once Cal quarterback, then, of course, quarterback for the 49ers, offensive coordinator for Brett Favre at the Green Bay Packers, then, of course, longtime great NFL Network anchor and analyst, right here when I interviewed him at the 2008 NFL Draft. This is at the Chelsea Piers luncheon, and here's what he was talking about regarding the Bill Walsh West Coast offense. And we're picking up on a conversation we'd had in the past regarding something called wide field and narrow vision. In other words, what he was saying in our first interview, which was done back in 1996 when I wrote for the Montclarian. I had a column in the local Oakland newspaper called the Montclarian, that first of all, when the quarterback leaves the huddle, the first thing is wide field. How are the players lined up in the formation? Are they lined up correctly? Then there's narrow vision. Narrow vision is where are the primary keys that the quarterback is told to look at, placement of the safety, and then, of course, the defensive front, and the placement of the cornerbacks. Where are they? You have to call out more often than not the defensive front. So it's either odd or it's even. Odd is where the nose tackle is over, the center. And then, of course, even is where you have 2 defensive tackles over the guards. And then at the snap, then there's the snap of the ball, and you go back to wide field in terms of watching the defense deploy, and then narrow vision. Where's your primary key going? And there's always a primary defender you're told to look at. This is in any play. You're told to look at, if the play is well designed, you're told to look at as the play unfolds. And then narrow vision, you look at the receiver. If it's primary receiver is number 1 open on this side, if the key tells you to go such that you can follow your normal progression as opposed to a blitz where there's a hot read. No, then you have to turn to your hot read. If you don't have a blitzer you're worrying about, then you're looking for your primary. Okay, is your primary open? No, then that's number one. Then you look at number two. All right. After you've gone through this, you are lucky if you have 2 seconds or 2.5 seconds to throw. That's the average, and that's it. You've got to know where you're going with the football. All right. This person writes. He. That's why I say you didn't really think about what he was writing. He wrote, poor fellow. He wrote that most of the time it looks like Mendoza's throwing locations are predetermined before the ball was snapped. Well, they're supposed to be, okay? Because anyone who designs an offense and intends to not have their quarterback get killed doesn't want their quarterback guessing where to go with the football when they're running the play. All that should have been predetermined. That's why you have game plans. That's why you analyze what your opponent's doing, because you're trying to figure out what they're most likely to do on defense so you can know where to throw the football. Daniel, I mean, that's just the way things are done, all right? He writes, he's a 1-2 read quarterback. Most quarterbacks are 1-2 reads because that's all the time you get. And then on top of that, when you break down a defense, you have 11 men. But think about it. Of the 11 men, either maybe 2, more likely 3 or 4, sometimes 5 are rushing. That cuts down the number of people that you have to look at. So if you're dealing with 11 people and 5 are rushing, all right, that means you got 5 that are coming in. That means you have 2 that are linebackers in coverage. And then that means you have 4 that are back in coverage, 2 safeties and 2 cornerbacks. 4, 2, 5. Okay? 4, 2, 5. So that breaks down pretty quickly the number of defenders you're throwing against. And then if you have 2 receivers, of the 4 that are back, 2 of them are occupied. You have the 2 safeties. They may be double covering on either receiver. If you have a back coming out, that's a third that has to be occupied by one of the safeties or the linebackers. And where their position, what pattern they take on, is determined by the way it's played. The play is drawn up. Bottom line, the quarterback and where the quarterback throws is predetermined. So Daniel writing, most of the time it looked like Mendoza's throwing locations were predetermined. Well, yeah, they're supposed to be. That's the sign of not only a good offense, that's just football. If you just decide to play football, Daniel, in the park with your friends, you are going to line up in a huddle. Someone's going to have a play idea, and even if the play idea is designed for them to get open, it's dependent on a type of pattern they believe is going to get them open, and that they're going to want you to throw to them a certain distance downfield. They turn a certain way, either hook or out, or maybe they go on a post pattern and want you to throw deep. All of that is predetermined throwing. You can't help but make a throw that's predetermined. It's called a play. It's called planning. And yet, Daniel writes in this publication, okay, called First Round Mock, most of the time it looked like Mendoza's throwing locations were predetermined before the ball was snapped. Well, yeah, they're supposed to be, Daniel. Then he says he's a 1-2 read quarterback who played in a run-pass offense option. Okay, fine. You could be a 1 to 2 read quarterback without playing in a pass option. But the reason why you have RPOs is for one particular reason, Daniel. The defenders today tend to be superhumanly fast. You don't get a lot of time to do too much, and so you have to fake a run play. You have to get your defenders to think you're going to do something other than what you intend to do. That's the way it is today, Daniel. So what you're blaming Fernando for doing, in point of fact, there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. Every quarterback goes through what he's doing, and it doesn't mean he is a bad quarterback at all. And yet, this is coming up here. And yet they put this idea, this ideology, Daniel and his compadres supposedly, on Twitter. First round mock. We said that they were going to give Fernando Mendoza a bunch of different looks. That's exactly what they've done from the jump, whether it's bringing 5 and playing man coverage, bringing pressure from depth. This defensive line has been so active tonight. We're talking about Purdue. Okay, fine. But as I recall, Indiana won the game. So, all right, Indiana won the game. Now, let's go to my friend Steve Mariucci. And Steve Mariucci has his explanation regarding football throwing in the West Coast offense and why different quarterbacks throw different ways. It has to do with the system. Here's Steve. This is again from Chelsea Piers in 2008 NFL draft.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen and Cal fans, this is Coach Steve Mariucci, who provided some of our great memories and years as Cal fans and 49er fans.
Go Bears, huh?
Yeah, right. And now, one of my favorite announcers on the NFL Network. Coach Mariucci, I went all the way back to 96 talking to you off camera about how you taught the West Coast to Walsh offense. My question is, first of all, the enduring way of teaching, wide field, narrow vision, hitch steps. Why don't more NFL teams use that now, for example, or do that?
Sure they do. Sure
Okay.
they do. There's probably a dozen teams in the National Football League out of 32 that are West Coast teams. Not the Niners right now.
Right. Why is that, in your opinion?
Because there are different systems, okay? There's the run and shoot. There's the wishbone.
Yes.
The Houston Veer. There's the system that's a digit system that you'll see the Mike Martzes and the Norv Turners use. It's different than the West Coast system. All the systems are good and productive if you have the right players. But it just so happens that the West Coast coaches are not necessarily at the Niners right now. Okay, they could very well be back at some point. You know, they've changed coordinators 4 times now in the last 4 years. But the West Coast is alive and well in the National Football League and in college. And then the other teams utilize the principles, many of the principles that Bill Walsh taught us all about the West Coast system. And when you talk to Bill, you know, God rest his soul, he will credit Don Coryell, Paul Brown, you know, other people who started him in that system. Now Bill Walsh made it win Super Bowls. That's why he gets credit. He made it win.
Something he said to me when I had the pleasure of interviewing him some time ago was that some people, and certainly not you because you taught me a lot of fundamentals when I met you at Cal. And I'm serious about that because I obviously never forgot it. But he said to me that many people focus on formations, but not the techniques like the hitch steps and throwing without a hitch step. Why is that? Is it not?
The games in any sport evolves, okay? And right now, and it evolves for certain reasons because of the availability of certain types of athletes or maybe rule changes. That's the one area that has made football, not just in the NFL, but in college, more pass happy, okay? Because linemen can use their hands, because receivers can run free after they get off a jam. Nobody can touch them anymore. The rules are very conducive for players to be productive in the passing game. So consequently, you're going to throw the ball more often. When Bill Walsh was with his Niners, he was in a 2 wide receiver set, 1 tight end, 2 backs, most of the time. Even in a 2-minute drill, they were in a normal, regular pro formation personnel group a lot of the time. He went to some 3 wides, seldom 4 wides. Well, now that's more prevalent. More 3 wides and 4 wides are the base offenses for some teams. Okay.
Yeah,
why? Because of the half.
Formations with zebra in the middle.
Zebra's 3 wide receivers.
Yeah.
You bet. Eagle is 4 wides, and a lot of colleges use that. We're talking spread offense. We're talking some option with these athletic quarterbacks. So the game's evolved a little bit. If Bill Walsh were in the game today, he would be altering his West Coast offense that way too, and continue. The principles would be the same. What he taught, the fundamentals of every route and every position and the reasons for doing things. He was a genius that way. But I think coaches have updated and expanded their thinking because of the rule changes. Now, Mike Holmgren's offense going to be a little different than John Gruden's or mine or Andy Reid's or all these West Coast guys. Why? Well, because of the ability of your quarterback. What does he do best? What can't he do? You know, you can't expect every quarterback to do what Steve Young did. You know, how many receivers do we have on my team that are capable? If I don't have a 3rd or 4th wide receiver, well, I'm not going to use that formation as often. You have a great tailback, you know, so your personnel will dictate, you know, where you go in that West Coast. But the scheme and the philosophies, and keep in mind this, the West Coast offense, we talk about an offense, but these guys are West Coast guys, not because they were born in California, no. It's a philosophy. It's a culture. It's how you practice. It's how you have training camp. It's how you travel. It's how you conduct your meetings. It's your walkthroughs and your padded practices and your shorts practices. That is probably as important or more important than just running 2-jet flanker drive. It's how you approach the whole thing and the philosophy that was proven successful over time.
Coach Mariucci, you can find you on the NFL Network as well as NFL.com. And thank you for your time. You're a legend.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as you can see, as he outlines, as Steve outlines, the kind of system you want to run is important. But again, you have certain constraints based on the fact that you've got, well, first of all, the rules say you have to have 5 linemen on the line of scrimmage. 7 men on the line of scrimmage. 5, you can have 5 offensive linemen standard. It doesn't say you necessarily have to have that. You can have variations of it, but you have to have 7 people on the line of scrimmage in some combination, starting with your center. And that rule requirement sets the tone for what you're able to do in terms of formation design, and then from that, how a play is going to be drawn up. It offers some constraints. So within that, you're going to get players that are so used to responding to certain on defense offenses or blocking styles that you have to come up with something different, and you have to make sure that whatever it is you're doing deploys quickly, because you're talking about people who are superhumanly fast and strong today. And the group of defenders that's coming out of the NFL draft this year are arguably the fastest ever to hit the NFL in history. They will be game changers, and I believe if you have looking at 9 to 10 picks or 11 picks in the draft, this is the one time you might consider spending most of those picks, say 90%, well, okay, say 70% of them on defense, because you're going to get your hands on some of the best defenders ever to come in the NFL, and best from a standpoint of speed, okay? So speed. And so someone wrote, David Kelly is a horrible person. Daniel Kelly is a horrible person, says Draft Talk Broncos. I don't know the man, and so I don't know I don't know what horrible is, and I don't want to attach myself to this because I honestly don't know who he is. I don't know what he looks like or anything. I'm only responding to what he wrote. It just doesn't make any sense at all with respect to how offenses work in football. And there's some people who come to this with, like, I understand Dan Orlovsky thinks that Ty Simpson is going to be a better quarterback than Fernando Mendoza. And where he gets that, I have to really watch his tape because I liked him as a quarterback. Um, this gentleman says, look at the stuff he wrote about Caleb Williams and Shooter Sanders. I'll take a look at it, David. Thank you for pointing that out. I'll give it more than a casual look-see, okay? Uh, I just found what he said, if he's going to go back and write something like as, and I don't mean to be insulting, but it's just nonsensical when a person writes, most of the time it looks like Mendoza's throwing locations are predetermined. I mean, every quarterback's throwing locations are predetermined. And now, and David says his shtick is always to crap on the top prospects every year. He doesn't make sense. Oh, so this is like something he does every year just to get eyeballs. I get you. Wow, that's sad. So basically, what you're telling me, David, is that this guy is just sort of coming up with stuff just to get my attention. Well, that worked. Oh my goodness. I, yes. See, David says yes. Right. Yes. Wow. Boy, how horrible. That's horrible. Um, and I, I don't see how he can be making any money off of it because, well, actually, he does have ads on here, doesn't he? Yeah, he does have ads. He has his Etsy um, ads here that I suppose you're supposed to click on. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. But oh boy, oh boy. Wow. Boy, oh boy. Well, then he says Quinn Evers was his QB1 last year. It's a sad way to make a living crapping on players. It is. I can understand being constructively critical, but this is not constructive criticism because it doesn't make any basic sense. If you know football, it's completely illogical. The trouble is, for those people who don't know football but want to find something to use against Fernando because they just don't like him, well, hey, guess what? Daniel serves it up hot for you to use, uh, eat, if you will, at the ready, and that's awful, absolutely awful. I'm glad. Thank you for telling me that, Dave. That's really terrible. Wow. Anyway, I now have to go to what Orlovsky said. Uh, there's some people believe that because Dan Orlovsky's agent is with CAA and Ty Simpson's agent is with CAA Creative Artists Agency, that is a motivator. To which Orlovsky said, "Well, he doesn't make enough money for that to be the case." Nah, I will say this: when CAA had Tom Condon, and they were pushing, Tom Condon had, I think it was Tim Couch as his quarterback. Yeah, under his wing, there was a constant habit of a number of quarterbacks that were under the CAA fold and Tom Condon, where it looked like every year an announcer with ESPN would speak favorably about a certain quarterback. Uh, Guess what? That quarterback was Tom Condon's. That went on for year after year after year after year, and it still goes on today, apparently. Although it's not as effective because of the advent of new, with what people would call then new media, and now it's just simply called, the internet. So, you know, good for Dan for speaking up and saying that he's not swayed, but everybody's entitled to their opinion, okay? And again, I don't devalue what Orlovsky says entirely. I take it on a case-by-case basis. I have to see what he said. My view is that Fernando is better than Ty Simpson because just when you think Ty Simpson's going to make that great comeback drive, he does something. He makes a mistake. He throws an interception, fumbles the ball, gets sacked. Part of that is the scheme. But the other part of it is just nerves. Uh, Mendoza has a determination that I've seen when he was with Cal any number of times. And Cal was a team that was much lesser in terms of coaching and quarterbacking, not quarterbacking, coaching and talent than Indiana last year, right? So Fernando is just a gamer. He's a guy who wants to win. He was put in an offense that is process oriented. He's process oriented, so he takes to it like a duck takes to water. There you go. Anyway, subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark NFL News by Zenny62.com. Thanks.